I've been asked to respond to is how did my colleagues and I move from collaborative therapy to collaborative practices to collaborative dialogic practice? In other words, from therapy to practices and beyond therapy. So this is a timely and often asked question, and I must turn a little bit to history to begin responding because my practice has been an emerging process over the years, and it is still emerging. So I will first reference the family therapy team that I studied with. They were clinical scholars, practitioners, researchers who wanted their work with their patients to have more sustainability after their patients went home to their seemingly powerful families or social networks. The team that I started studying with wanted to keep up with societal changes and with theoretical and philosophical ideas that were emerging in the mental health field. So I still want to keep up with what's happening in the literature and societal changes so that my work maintains coherence or connection with contemporary changes and challenges. So my colleagues and I began reading literature outside of our disciplines and outside of therapy for sure, and having study groups, and the reading and the studying outside these disciplines began to significantly influence the practice, and in turn provided new vocabularies and understandings for our clinical experiences as well as the experiences that clients were reporting to us. And so this only increased our appetite for reading outside of the field of psychotherapy. Now, this was also a time when some of the aspects of the Batesonian influence and the developments of the Mental Research Institute in Palo Alto, California's problem-focused approach in strategic therapy interested us. And what we were most curious about was a thread that ran through the developments that they were making, and that had to do with language. And my oversimplified view is that the focus on language was really a focus on language in a strategic sense. In other words, that if you could pose your questions, your homework assignments, your comments, etc., within the client's language or within the client's realities or beliefs, then you would have less resistance. Clients would be more willing to do what we thought they should be doing, and therapy, therefore, would be more successful. So what happened, though, is we became very interested in the client's language. We began to shift because we began to realize that focusing on what people were saying really caught our attention and our curiosity, and we immersed ourselves in the stories that they were telling. And we found that we would ask questions that really helped us gain more understanding of their story, and that in this process, they were also gaining new meanings for their stories and clarifying some of their understandings. So the family therapy approaches and the ones that evolved from these early influences were strongly influenced by general systems theory and cybernetic theories and the metaphors that they provided. So again, as we became more and more captured by the notion of language, we began interested in the ideas of conversation and then dialogue. Again, as I said earlier, when we found that when we listened very curiously as clients told their stories, that we became interested in their stories in a different way than we had previously been. We moved away from thinking of family systems, as cybernetic systems in those mechanical metaphors. And we began developing the idea that families and that people in general were language systems, that we were born in, lived in, loved in, died in language, and that language was something that was very very much a characteristics of being a human being on this planet. So in other words, the mechanical-like descriptions and explanations of human systems did not fit with our clinical experiences, nor what we were learning from our clients. And simultaneously, we were thinking that family therapy itself had not recognized its usefulness and with human systems other than families. Something else that began to influence the use of the word collaborative was that this teamwork and this development of the ideas first started, and at the time that I'm talking about and referring to right now, in a medical school setting, and that in that setting, and as many medical settings, you often hear of compliant patients, patients who are cooperative. In other words, patients who make the nurses and doctors happy by doing what they tell them to do. So we began thinking we didn't want anyone to think that we were trying to get people to do what we wanted them to do. We were trying to help them live the kind of lives that they preferred to live. So I began really thinking and looking in the dictionary, and I landed on the word collaborative, even though if you look in any dictionary, collaborative and cooperative have almost exactly the same definition. They both include the notion of with in them, or the idea of the word with. And what distinguishes the way that I use collaboration is the word with, and what later became influenced by John Schotter and Lynn Hoffman, referring to the work as a withness practice. In other words, the client and I, or the client and me, were in a partnership, in a conversational partnership with each other, in which we felt like we were talking and acting in a way that put us on more of an equal or equitable level with the client. Now, that is to say that I didn't think, nor did my colleagues think, that there was no such thing as being in a position of power or authority, because once you are identified with a profession or a particular skill, etc., in most of our cultures for sure, you are considered an expert. But we didn't want to put ourselves in an expert position. So the word collaborative really fit. And then, as I said a moment ago, we began to think in terms of conversational partnerships, that we're doing something with the people we work with, we're doing it together, we're being led by them. It's almost as if we felt like they were the teacher and we were the students. We were learning what they thought was most important for us to learn about them. And we realized that over time, what began to shift, that this teacher-student relationship really began to be more equitable in terms of we were both teacher-students. We were both learning from each other. So we were no longer in the kind of expert position than we had been trained, and probably most of you listening have been trained to be in. So skipping ahead to connect with Beyond Therapy, in 2002, two of my colleagues and I formed a company called Access Success International to offer coaching to businesses and individuals and to provide coaching training to therapists. So I consulted then and did coaching then, and still do that with various companies and people in leadership positions. This whole interest in coaching came about because coaching in the United States was becoming very popular, and our learners, our students, were asking us about coaching. So we started reading on coaching, and we thought, gosh, we would do it differently. So what we found was that what we thought of the process, that we wanted to have, the kind of space we wanted to create with our clients, the kind of relationship we wanted to create, was also successful in coaching. We found we were working the same way in education, the same way in research. So it just was a natural shift to adding working with different kinds of people and different kinds of human systems and different kinds of life events. And then I began thinking, well, it might be useful to learn something about businesses and the corporate world. So I joined two business groups, and one of them was a group of entrepreneurs, people who had started and owned their own business at the time, and several of them had started and owned multiple businesses. and had been very successful. The other group that I joined was a group of leaders of corporations and retired leaders of corporations. And one of the things that caught my attention from both of these groups is that the membership, the people that I was working with and hoping to learn from, were working from expert positions. They were the experts with the answers. And as they began trying to learn more about what I did, they became curious about my work and invited me to begin to give talks and to consult with them and their clients. So that was more of a move into the business and the corporate world. So this experience with these two business groups supported my belief that the relational space and conversational processes were really most important, regardless of who you were working with. What is important is the ability to increase a collaborative relationship and a generative conversation. That collaboration and dialogue are critical. They go together. I often say they go hand in hand. In other words, they really fit with each other. And neither is more important nor comes first over the other. I've often said, and some of you have heard me say, that the kinds of relationships we begin to develop with people begin to influence the kinds of relationships that we'll have with each other, and vice versa. The way we begin to talk with each other influences the kinds of relationships we'll have with each other, and vice versa. I messed that up a little bit. I'm sorry.
So Harlene, I'm sorry to interrupt you for a moment, but it seems that this conversation can go forever. We've been kind of talking for about 12 minutes or 14.
Wow.
So do you think you can close for right now this conversation?
I was just getting ready to say a couple of more things. One
Go
is that
ahead.
what I'm talking about requires a mindset shift. And the biggest mindset shift is a shift from being an expert knower to a non-expert non-knower. That's a whole nother story. So again, implicit in my story is that my practices have always been an emerging process, trying to respond to what we were meeting in these changing times, and certainly now. So thank you, Ken and Kill, for inviting me to say a few words. And my apology for saying a few too many.
No, there are never too many, Harlene. And thank you very much for again doing this small talk in a topic. And maybe this is a topic that we should continue in another moment. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for inviting me.